Hello, dear friend, and welcome to the Sleepy Hub, your home for sleepy history, facts, spotlights, and more. I'm so glad you're here tonight. You've done enough for one day. You've thought enough, tried enough, and carried enough. Now, it's time to rest. Let your body find comfort wherever you are. Feel the bed or the chair beneath you, holding you with quiet support. Take a deep breath in through your nose and slowly exhale through your mouth. Again, breathe in peace and breathe out the day. As you breathe, imagine the air around you softening, like a blanket of dusk that tucks you in. Each breath helps you drift a little deeper into calm, a little closer to the rhythm of rest that the earth itself is following right now. Outside your window, the season is changing. The days are shorter, the nights longer. The sun leans low on the horizon, painting everything in honey and gold. Leaves curl and fall like letters from the sky, carrying messages of release, of letting go. There's a sweetness in the air that feels ancient, like the earth is whispering stories from long ago. Tonight, we'll listen to one of those stories, the story of how people across time have honored this season. Not with fear or fright, but with gratitude, with reflection, and with light. You see, Halloween wasn't always about costumes or candy. Long before the word existed, this time of year marked a turning point in the rhythm of life. It was when fields grew quiet after the harvest, when the air smelled of wood smoke and apples, when families gathered close to share warmth and stories by the fire. It was a time when people looked both backward and forward, remembering those who had gone before them and preparing for the winter ahead. As you listen, you might imagine yourself walking through the centuries, across misty fields, along candlelit paths, through laughter and song, through stillness and prayer. This is a story about belonging, about the ways humans have always found comfort in each other, and in the steady turning of the seasons. And as we travel, you might find that this ancient rhythm still lives quietly inside you. The same rhythm that tells the trees when to let go, and tells your heart when to rest. So, take one more deep, gentle breath. Let your shoulders fall heavy. Let your mind grow soft. You are safe, and you are home. The story begins now, long ago, in a time when the world moved slower and the fields grew quiet. Chapter 1. When the fields grew quiet. It begins with silence, the kind of silence that feels alive, full of tiny sounds hidden within it. A crow calling somewhere in the distance, the hush of wind moving across empty fields, the faint creak of a wooden gate left ajar after the last cart of grain passed through. The harvest was done. The long days of labor beneath the summer sun had ended, and the earth could finally rest. In those early days, people lived by the rhythm of the land. They planted when the ground was soft, tended when the sun was high, and gathered when the air began to cool. By the time October arrived, the fields were bare and golden, the barns full, and the people tired but content. They looked out at the quiet earth and felt a deep, wordless gratitude. The land had given all it could, and now it too needed sleep. Evenings came early, smoke curled from chimneys, carrying the scent of wood and peat. Inside small stone cottages, families sat close around flickering hearths. The light from the fire danced over their faces, a soft, warm glow against the dark outside. There was comfort in that light. It meant safety, nourishment, and the promise that no matter how cold the night grew, warmth could always be found within. They didn't have calendars like ours, but they knew the year had turned. The harvest was not just a task, it was a threshold. Each season brought its own spirit, and autumn carried the spirit of endings and beginnings. The old crops were cleared away, the soil rested, and people found themselves with quiet evenings again. The rush of summer had slowed. Now there was time to tell stories, to sing songs, to remember. Children would sit at their parents' feet, listening to tales that stretched back through generations, stories of brave ancestors, kind spirits, and the mysteries of the land. Outside, the moon rose large and round, silvering the edges of every leaf. To those who watched, it felt as if the earth itself was glowing. There was magic in that stillness, not the kind that startles, but the kind that soothes, the kind that reminds you that everything is part of something greater, and that rest is as sacred as work. People in those days believed the world had its seasons of waking and sleeping just as they did. The earth needed rest, the same way they did after long months of labor. So they honored it. They gave thanks to the fields and the animals, to the rivers and skies. They lit small fires, not to frighten, but to celebrate. Each flame was a whisper of gratitude, a prayer for light through the coming dark. At the heart of every home was a sense of rhythm, the knowledge that everything moves in cycles. The wheat that had been gathered would become bread, the apples would become cider, and the seeds would wait underground until spring. Nothing was lost, it only changed form. The people understood that endings were not to be feared, but embraced, because every ending was simply another beginning waiting to unfold. Outside, the nights grew cooler, and the first frosts began to appear. The world glittered under the moon like a field of stars. Even the silence seemed softer. If you stepped out into the night, you might hear the faint rustle of dry stalks, or see the last of the fireflies fading near the hedges. The air carried the smell of wood smoke and soil, the scent of the earth exhaling after a long, full season. And so, as the fields grew quiet, the people did too. They gathered close, wrapped in wool and stories, grateful for all they had. Their hearts beat in time with the season, slower, gentler, steady as the falling leaves. They didn't yet know that these simple acts of gratitude would echo for thousands of years, shaping the traditions that would one day become Halloween. All they knew was that the year was turning, and in the stillness of autumn, life felt whole. Chapter 2: Samhain and the Gentle Veil. Long before the word Halloween was ever spoken, there was a celebration called Samhain. It marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of winter, a pause between what had been gathered and what was yet to come. The people of the Celtic lands believed this was not just a change in weather, but a shift in the very breath of the world. The days grew shorter, the nights stretched longer, and time itself seemed to soften. The veil between the seen and unseen thinned, they said, not in a way that frightened them, but in a way that made them feel closer to everything: the past, the present, the earth, and one another. They saw this time as sacred. The crops were safely stored, the animals sheltered, and the fires stacked high to keep away the chill. In the hush that followed the year's hard work, people gathered under the moon and gave thanks for life's turning wheel. They didn't speak of death as something to fear, only as another kind of season. Just as the trees released their leaves, people learned to release too, to let go of what was finished and make peace with change. On the night of Samhain, bonfires burned bright across the hills. The flames flickered like 1,000 small suns, pushing back the dark and lighting the faces of those who danced and sang nearby. Every household carried an ember from the great communal fire to rekindle their own hearth, a symbol of unity, warmth, and protection for the winter months ahead. It wasn't only light they carried home, it was connection. That glow reminded them that no one faced the darkness alone. The people believed that during Samhain, the worlds of the living and the departed touched hands, not in fear, but in love. They would leave out bits of bread and bowls of milk for kind spirits who might wander by, or for ancestors whose memory still lived in the home. A chair might be left empty by the fire, not to mourn, but to honor, to say, "You are remembered, you are still part of us." In the gentle flicker of candlelight, there was comfort in the idea that love never truly ends. It only changes form, just as the seasons do. Outside, the air was cool and damp, carrying the earthy scent of peat and the sweet, smoky perfume of burning wood. The sky stretched wide and dark above them, scattered with silver stars. From distant hills, the soft sound of drums and voices could sometimes be heard, rising and falling like the wind itself. It was said that those who listened closely could hear the whispers of time, old stories carried on the breeze, ancient blessings floating through the night. Inside the homes, the glow of the hearth was steady and golden. Families sat together, telling tales of ancestors and heroes, of lessons learned and wisdom passed down. Children listened with wide eyes, comforted not just by the stories, but by the steady rhythm of their parents' voices and the warmth of the fire. Every crackle of the logs sounded like the earth speaking, reassuring them that they were safe, that life was continuing, that rest was deserved. Somewhere outside, a candle might flicker in the window, a small symbol of welcome. To travelers, it meant warmth. To spirits, it meant love. To everyone who saw it, it meant hope, that even in the longest night, there is always light. The people of those times didn't think of Samhain as frightening. They thought of it as a time of reunion and gratitude, a time to honor what had come before and to trust in what would come again. There was wisdom in that rhythm, in knowing that everything moves in circles. The crops would return, the sun would rise, the snow would fall and then melt, and through it all, the fires of home would keep burning, tended by hands that remembered and hearts that hoped. Samhain was not the end of something, but the beginning of rest, the deep breath before winter's long sleep. And so, as the bonfires faded to embers and the stars shone brighter overhead, people went to bed with a sense of peace. They knew the world was changing, but they also knew it was exactly as it should be. In that knowledge, they found warmth. In that stillness, they found home. And from those quiet rituals, the fires, the candles, the remembering, the spirit of what we now call Halloween was born. Chapter 3: Fires for Friendship and Light. When the winds of late October began to sweep across the hills, the people knew it was time to gather again. The nights grew colder, but the heart of every village glowed brighter. Wherever there were friends or neighbors, there was a fire, not a wild blaze, but a gentle one, tended with care and purpose. The fires of autumn were not made to frighten away the dark. They were made to welcome warmth, to invite company, and to remind everyone that no matter how long the night, it would always end in dawn. Imagine the glow of hundreds of small fires scattered across the landscape, each one a quiet sun in the sea of darkness. Sparks drifted upward like tiny stars, and the smell of smoke carried across the fields, rich and comforting. People came together, bringing bits of wood or dried herbs as offerings. A farmer might toss in a branch from the orchard that had borne fruit that year, whispering thanks as it burned. A mother might add a handful of dried lavender for peace, a child a shiny pebble or leaf. Small gifts given in gratitude. Around the fires, songs rose, low and steady, like the hum of the earth. Old melodies, passed from voice to voice, told of the turning of the seasons, of harvests and homecomings. The rhythm of the drums echoed the beat of the heart, grounding everyone in the same pulse. There was laughter too, soft and genuine, carried by the wind like a thread connecting one fire to the next. For a few nights each year, every worry seemed smaller in the face of the shared light. These gatherings were more than celebration. They were renewal. People traded food, shared stories, and spoke of plans for the winter. Someone might mend a neighbor's cloak by firelight, or exchange apples for honey, or simply sit in silence beside a friend. The flames painted everyone in gold and amber, erasing the lines between rich and poor, old and young. In that glow, they were all the same, human beings wrapped in warmth, belonging to one another and to the land that sustained them. The fires also served a gentler purpose, to mark the passing of time. Each spark that leapt upward was a reminder that light returns even after darkness. When a flame flickered low, someone would stir it, feeding it carefully so that it would last through the night. In this way, they cared not only for the fire but for each other. Keeping the light alive became a sacred act, a promise that, even as the world grew cold, love and companionship would not fade. Children would doze against their parents' shoulders, lulled by the rhythm of voices and the crackling logs. The older folk would speak quietly about years past, about harvests long ago, about loved ones now gone but never forgotten. There was no sadness in their words, only tenderness. They believed those who had gone before were near, drawn by the glow of the fire and the sound of familiar laughter. The boundary between worlds felt thin but kind, like a curtain of silk that shimmered rather than separated. When the night deepened, people would add larger logs to the fire and sit watching the embers. The red glow pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and strong. It was said that if you stared into the coals long enough, you could see glimpses of what mattered most, not in visions, but in feelings. The warmth on your skin, the comfort of community, the gentle hum of life continuing. That was the true magic of the fire. It didn't show you the future. It showed you what was already here. And when the first light of morning touched the horizon, the fires were allowed to fade. Smoke rose in delicate ribbons, carrying prayers and gratitude to the sky. People returned home, smelling faintly of wood smoke and happiness, hearts lighter for having shared the night. The ashes left behind were scattered on the fields, a blessing for the soil, a promise that life would bloom again. These fires for friendship and light would one day evolve into our modern customs, the glowing lanterns, the warm gatherings, the candles flickering in windows. But their purpose remains the same, to remind us that community is the truest warmth of all. As the last ember faded and the morning sun rose over the quiet land, the people knew they would gather again when the wheel of the year turned once more. And in that knowing, they carried peace. The quiet assurance that every light kindled in love endures, long after the flames have gone out. Chapter 4: Candles in the Windows. As autumn deepened and the winds grew cooler, the grand fires that once blazed across hillsides gave way to gentler lights, candles glowing softly in the windows of small homes and cottages. The great communal gatherings were fewer now, replaced by the quiet comfort of families indoors, huddled near hearths and under woolen blankets. But though the season grew still, the light never truly dimmed. It simply moved closer to the heart. In those times, a single candle meant more than illumination. It was a symbol of safety, of warmth, of welcome. Travelers moving through the countryside on cold October nights would look for those flickers in the distance. A candle in the window told them that they weren't alone. It said, "There is kindness here. There is bread and warmth and company if you need it." The world was vast and wild, but that little light, that humble flame, had the power to guide someone safely home. Inside, the glow of candlelight softened everything it touched. The rough wooden walls looked golden. Shadows danced gently along the floor, moving in rhythm with the tiny flame. Mothers would hum lullabies as they spun wool. Fathers would carve small tools or mend worn shoes. And children would rest on soft mats near the fire, watching the candle's slow, steady flicker until their eyes grew heavy with sleep. The air smelled faintly of beeswax and hearth smoke, scents that blended into a perfume of peace. Each evening, lighting the candle became a ritual of love. The flame wasn't just for seeing, it was for remembering. Many believed that the gentle glow helped guide wandering spirits, not the kind that frightened, but those who were lost or lonely, back to warmth. A candle by the window whispered, "You are not forgotten." For those who had lost loved ones, the act of lighting that small flame felt like lighting a bridge between worlds, made entirely of tenderness. There was also a practical grace in the candles. Without modern lights, they taught patience. A candle's life was slow and delicate. It required care, a steady hand, a mindful breath. Children learned to carry one from table to hearth, protecting it from sudden drafts, watching how even the smallest breeze could make it tremble. The candle reminded everyone that light was precious, that attention was a kind of devotion. Outside, as the world slipped further toward winter, those little flames created constellations of warmth scattered across the countryside. If you stood on a nearby hill, you might see dozens of them, tiny suns burning bravely against the night. Each one marked a story, a family, a circle of life continuing. The darkness between them wasn't frightening. It was simply the space that made the lights more beautiful. Some said that when the wind blew softly through the trees, it carried messages between homes, that the flicker of one candle could somehow speak to another, sending wordless comfort through the night. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. What mattered was how it made people feel, connected, part of something bigger than themselves. In that shared glow, isolation faded. Even the act of extinguishing the candle at the end of the night carried meaning. People didn't blow it out carelessly. They cupped their hands, whispering a silent wish or prayer, thanking the flame for its company before letting it rest. As smoke spiraled upward, it felt like the night itself was receiving their gratitude. folding it gently into its endless sky. Generations later, long after the world had changed, this practice would remain in quiet ways. Porch lights left on for loved ones, pumpkins glowing at doorsteps, lanterns flickering during October nights. These too were candles in the windows, echoes of that same ancient tenderness. The desire to bring light into darkness never fades, it only changes shape. So, when the first frosts painted the windows and the harvest lay tucked away, the people of those early days rested easy beneath their roofs. They knew that outside, the wind might howl and the trees might creak, but inside, the light was steady, the warmth was certain, and the love, like the candle, would burn all through the night. Chapter 5: All Hallows and the Kind Remembering. As time moved forward and centuries turned like pages in a well-loved book, the world changed, yet the rhythm of the seasons remained the same. The old ways of honoring the harvest and the quiet between worlds softly intertwined with new traditions. When the Christian faith began to spread through the villages and fields of Europe, the Church looked kindly upon this turning of the year and gave it new names: All Hallows Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day. But at its heart, the meaning stayed familiar: remembrance, gratitude, and love that reached across time. The word hallow means holy, and All Hallows Eve was the night before the Day of Saints, a time to honor those who had lived good and generous lives. Bells rang gently from church towers, calling people to prayer, and candles flickered on windowsills and altars. In the towns and countryside alike, people walked with quiet reverence, holding lanterns to light their way through the cool evening air. It was said that the veil between this world and the next was thin, but that thinness was a blessing, a soft doorway through which love could travel freely. All Saints' Day celebrated the known and unknown saints, the shining examples of goodness and courage. But the day after, All Souls' Day, was even closer to the heart. It was for everyone, for mothers and fathers, friends and neighbors, for every ordinary soul who had ever loved and lived and left a mark of kindness behind. Families would gather to share simple meals, often including bread and honey, symbolizing the sweetness of memory. Children would listen as elders spoke softly of their ancestors, not as distant figures, but as part of the family still. In some villages, bells were rung through the night so that no soul would feel forgotten. The air would hum with warmth, a shared vibration of remembrance that soothed even the heaviest hearts. Others baked small round loaves called soul cakes, each one offered for a departed loved one. When visitors came to the door, especially children or travelers, they were given a cake and a blessing, a gesture that said, "You are welcome here. May love follow you wherever you go." Over time, this gentle exchange of food and goodwill would echo into what we now know as trick-or-treating. Though in those early days, it was never about mischief, only about sharing the sweetness of life. The merging of faiths, old and new, wove something beautiful. The bonfires became smaller, but their meaning stayed. Light in the dark, hope through the cold. The prayers whispered in the churches and the songs sung by the hearth were two sides of the same truth, that love endures. The people did not see their old ways vanish. They simply saw them transform. Samhain's fires became candles on altars, its offerings became loaves of bread, its stories became hymns, and in every flame, every word, the same gentle intention lived on, to honor life by remembering it. The landscape of those nights was peaceful. The harvest moon rose full and pale over quiet villages, and mist gathered low along the fields. From one window to the next, a golden glow flickered softly. You could almost hear the murmur of families praying, the clink of plates, the soft laugh of children too sleepy to stay awake. The world felt wrapped in gratitude. There was a stillness that wasn't emptiness, but fullness, the kind that comes when the heart is at rest. Even travelers, walking lonely paths on All Hallows' Eve, would speak of a strange comfort that seemed to hang in the air, as though unseen hands guided them safely through the dark. It was said that if you lit a candle and placed it by the window, its light could guide lost souls to peace, or weary wanderers to shelter. And so homes became beacons of kindness, each one a tiny lighthouse glowing against the sea of night. In this quiet blending of traditions, Celtic and Christian, ancient and new, something timeless was born. It was the understanding that memory itself is sacred, that to remember is to love again. The people didn't need grand ceremonies to feel connected. All they needed was a flame, a prayer, and a heart open to the mystery of life continuing in its many forms. As the bells of All Hallows faded into the night, and the candles burned low to waxen wick, the people laid their heads to rest. The fields outside lay silver with frost, and the stars shimmered like distant candles of their own. The earth was ready for sleep, and so were they, content in the knowing that love, once kindled, never truly goes out. Chapter 6: Lantern Walks and Apple Nights. When the solemn quiet of All Hallows had passed, the people turned their hearts once again towards celebration. Not the loud kind, but the kind that glows softly, like the embers of a long-burning fire. The days were shorter now, the light golden and low, and the air carried the unmistakable scent of autumn's end. Crisp leaves, cool soil, and the faint sweetness of apples stored in wooden bins. This was the time of lantern walks and apple nights, when laughter returned to the fields, and the chill of evening was met with songs and smiles. The lanterns were simple things, often made from turnips or gourds, hollowed carefully by small, patient hands. Inside each, a candle was set, and when lit, they cast a warm, dappled glow that danced across faces and paths. The tradition was part gratitude, part play, the joy of carrying light through darkness, of seeing your own little flame join the gentle procession of others. Families would walk together at twilight, their lanterns swaying like stars come down to earth. Children whisper to each other as their feet crunch through fallen leaves, and the grown-ups spoke softly about the year gone by, its challenges, its blessings, its quiet miracles. The air on those evenings was full of life. You could hear the low murmur of voices, the distant bark of a farm dog, and somewhere far away, the faint rhythm of a fiddle carried on the breeze. People stopped by neighbours' doors to share small gifts, apples, nuts, honey cakes, tokens of abundance from their harvests. It was a way of saying, "We have enough, and so do you. Let us share." The world felt smaller in those moments, stitched together by kindness. Apples held special meaning then. They were symbols of good health, love, and renewal. During the harvest season, apple games were played in nearly every village. Barrels of cool water would be filled and placed near the fire, and children would take turns trying to catch apples with their teeth, laughter echoing like bells through the room. Even the adults joined in, pretending for a while that they were young again. Outside, others gathered around fires to roast apples on long sticks until their skins split and their sweetness filled the air. There was nothing grand about it, only joy in simplicity, joy in togetherness. In some places, apples were used for little charms and wishes. People would peel them in long ribbons, tossing the curls over their shoulders to see if the shapes foretold good fortune. Seeds were counted for luck, slices shared for love. It wasn't superstition so much as gratitude turned playful, a way to honor the mystery of life while smiling at it. Lantern nights often ended with songs. As families returned home from their walks, they placed their glowing lanterns on fences, window ledges, or by the gate, lighting the paths for those who might still be walking. Seen from afar, the village looked like a constellation of tiny suns, flickering, breathing, alive. The stars above seemed to answer, their reflection shimmering faintly in nearby streams. It was as if heaven and earth were quietly nodding to one another in mutual appreciation. Inside, the hearth fires burned low and steady. The lanterns were brought in, their candles gently extinguished with a whisper of thanks. The smell of wax and wood smoke lingered as families settled in for the night. Some would press apples into cider, the rhythmic creak of the press becoming a lullaby. Others would sip tea or warm milk and talk softly about the winter ahead, about quilts to be mended, food to be stored, stories to be told when the snow came. Those lantern walks and apple nights were small things, perhaps, but they held something deep. They were reminders that life is sweetest when shared, and that even in darkness, there is light to be made, not grand or blinding, but human and warm. In those simple October rituals, the people of long ago found what every heart still longs for, to be connected, to be seen, and to feel safe in the glow of love and belonging. And as the final lanterns were dimmed and the moon climbed high, silvering the rooftops and empty fields, the world exhaled. The fires outside faded to coals, but inside, the light lived on. In laughter, in gratitude, and in the quiet certainty that even as seasons change, the spirit of warmth and kindness endures. Chapter 7. Crossing Oceans. As the centuries turned and the world grew wider, people began to move, from villages to cities, from one country to another, from familiar valleys to distant shores. Some traveled in search of new beginnings, some to escape hardship, and others simply because life has a way of carrying us forward like leaves on the wind. And as they went, they brought their stories with them, tucked quietly in their hearts like glowing embers. Among those stories were the old autumn customs, the harvest gratitude, the candle in the window, the flicker of lanterns, the whisper of Samhain. When ships set sail from the shores of Ireland, Scotland, and England, their decks crowded with hopeful faces, the memory of those old festivals travelled too. The voyagers looked out over the grey ocean and saw the same moon that had watched over their ancestors' fires. Even across the vast sea, that moon was a reminder that the rhythm of life, light and dark, harvest and rest, remained constant no matter where one went. The wind was cold, the journeys long, and yet in the hearts of those travellers burned the same small warmth, the desire to carry the light of home into a new land. In the early days of the New World, life was not easy. Settlers built their homes from rough timber, tilled unfamiliar soil, and braved winters that seemed endless. Yet when October came, something familiar stirred in their spirits. The scent of autumn leaves, the sound of the wind moving through bare branches. These things called back the memory of their homelands. And though their tools and clothes were different now, the feeling was the same: gratitude, reverence, and the urge to gather close as the year turned toward rest. So they began again. In the flickering light of hearths, they told their children the stories their parents had told them, of lantern walks, of friendly spirits, of fires for friendship and light. Pumpkins, native to this new land, took the place of the turnips and beets they once carved. The wide, round fruit was easier to shape and glowed more brightly in the dark, becoming a new symbol of warmth and welcome. Where once candles had burned in hollowed gourds across green Celtic hills, now they shone from wooden porches and farmhouse windows under American skies. The people who had crossed the ocean found comfort in these familiar rituals. Lighting a candle in October was more than decoration. It was remembrance. It was saying, though we are far from where we began, the spirit of home still lives here. Communities began to form, small at first, then growing with each generation. Harvest festivals were held, where neighbors shared food, stories, and laughter. Apples bobbed once again in wooden barrels. Bonfires burned in the crisp night air. Even in the strangeness of a new world, the ancient rhythm continued, softened, and reshaped by new hands and new hope. And just as they had carried their traditions across oceans, those traditions began to change in return. From the indigenous peoples of the land, the settlers learned new ways of honoring the earth, giving thanks for corn, pumpkins, and wild fruits that sustained them. The joining of these customs created something fresh, a blending of gratitude, reverence, and play that felt universal, as if the spirit of the season itself was expanding to include everyone who loved it. By the 1800s, these celebrations began to feel both ancient and new. In small towns, children would carve pumpkins and carry them down lantern-lit roads, just as their ancestors had once done with turnips in distant hills. Adults would gather for dances, for feasts, for storytelling by firelight. There was laughter and song, and an easy understanding that this time of year was for community, for remembering, for resting, and for rejoicing in life's turning. The immigrants who had crossed the sea brought their roots with them, and from those roots, something beautiful grew. Over time, the little harvest gatherings would blossom into what we now recognize as Halloween. Not as a day of fear, but as a celebration of creativity, connection, and joy. Still, if you listen closely to the October wind, you can hear the echoes of that journey. The sound of waves against the hulls of ships, the hum of old songs sung softly in candlelight, the whisper of hope carried across the endless ocean. Those who left their homes never truly left them behind. The light they carried traveled farther than they could have dreamed, finding new shores, new faces, and new forms, yet always shining with the same intention: to bring warmth to the dark and love to the unknown. Chapter 8: Pumpkins and Play. By the time the world had settled into the rhythm of new lands and growing towns, October had become a month of familiar comfort, a time when even the busiest people slowed down to notice the turning leaves, the smell of spice and smoke, and the glow of pumpkins shining from doorsteps. What had once been sacred ritual had softened into everyday joy. There was no fear in it, only play, the light-hearted kind that makes children giggle and grown-ups remember what it feels like to wonder. Pumpkins became the heart of the season. Round, sturdy and cheerful, they were a symbol of the harvest, bright as the sun and shaped like the earth itself. People carved them with care, at first to carry light, then simply for delight. A simple candle placed inside turned an ordinary gourd into something magical, a soft beacon of home. The earliest carvings were plain faces or patterns, but soon they grew into works of art, friendly, funny, and full of personality. At night, the glow of these pumpkins turned villages and towns into warm, golden wonderlands, each one a small promise that joy still lived here. Children especially loved this time of year. The chill in the air seemed to wake up their imaginations. They would run through piles of leaves, laughing at the crunch beneath their boots, cheeks pink from the wind. They dressed in costumes not to frighten, but to pretend, to become something new for a little while. A hero, a fairy, a farmer, a favourite animal. The world encouraged play in October. It was a kind of magic all its own, the magic of transformation, of saying, "Tonight I can be anything." Communities joined in with delight. Schools held small parades, neighbours opened their doors with bowls of sweets, and families gathered for evenings of storytelling and games. The old apple nights continued, with barrels of water set on porches and children laughing as they tried to catch the slippery fruit. There were songs, warm cider, and gentle mischief, never cruel, only playful. It was a season that invited everyone to remember the joy of togetherness. And though much had changed, something of the old ways still whispered beneath it all. The candles in pumpkins were echoes of the ancient lanterns once carried through misty fields. The gatherings were modern versions of the harvest feasts that had long ago united neighbours in thanks. Even the laughter of children carried the same bright energy that once surrounded Samhain fires. That celebration of life in the face of change. The heart of it all had never left. It had simply learned to smile. For adults too, October brought renewal. After long months of work, it was a time to slow down, to savour simple pleasures, a good meal, a warm drink, a cosy fire. Many found themselves remembering their own childhoods, their own lanterns, their own quiet walks beneath the stars. The season was like a mirror, gently reflecting the cycles of life itself, how everything old becomes new again, and how joy, once shared, never fades. As dusk fell and the first stars appeared, pumpkins glowed on every doorstep, their soft light mingling with the scent of cinnamon and the rustle of leaves. Children ran down the lanes with laughter trailing behind them like ribbons. In windows, candles flickered. Not for spirits now, but for family, for love, for the warmth of being together. The night was alive, but not in the way of fear. Alive with joy, with imagination, with the sparkle of community. And somewhere in all that laughter and light, the quiet spirit of the old world smiled. The fires of friendship, the candles in the windows, the gratitude of harvest. They had crossed oceans and centuries to arrive here, dressed now in pumpkins and play. The essence was the same, to gather, to remember, and to fill the dark with light. So as the moon rose high and the air grew cool, the people of this new Halloween carried on the ancient promise without even knowing it. That promise was simple and pure. That joy is a kind of light, and when shared, it keeps the world warm. Chapter 9. The Spirit of Togetherness. As the years unfolded and generations passed, Halloween continued to change, just as the seasons do. Yet through every change, its true essence remained, the simple joy of coming together. What began as ancient harvest gratitude, and then a humble night of candles and remembering, had become something bright and full of laughter. Every October, the world seemed to hum with a familiar rhythm, one that reminded everyone, young and old, that light is best when shared, Towns and cities began to decorate their streets with autumn's finest colours: gold, amber, deep red, and brown. The air carried the scent of caramel and roasted nuts. Windows glowed with strings of soft lights, and shopkeepers set pumpkins by their doors. It wasn't just about festivity, it was about creating beauty in the fading light. The whole community joined in, children painting leaves, parents baking treats, neighbours smiling to one another as they hung lanterns from porches. The old spirit of the fires still lived in these small acts of warmth. Every October evening became an opportunity to gather. Families carved pumpkins together, each face more creative than the last. Laughter filled kitchens as dough rose and cinnamon mingled with the scent of apples baking in the oven. Even those who lived alone found themselves lighting candles or placing a pumpkin near the window, not out of habit, but out of quiet belonging. There was comfort in knowing that across the city, thousands of others were doing the same, each flame part of something larger and deeply human. Halloween had become a kind of symphony, with every person adding a note. Children's giggles echoed through neighborhoods, mingling with the gentle murmur of parents walking behind them. Costumes fluttered in the wind, homemade, heartfelt, silly and clever. Each one was a celebration of imagination, a reminder that life is meant to be played with. Strangers met at doorsteps, exchanged smiles, and shared kindness disguised as candy. And though few stopped to think about it, these small exchanges were ancient at their core, offerings of sweetness, symbols of community and care. In schools and workplaces, people joined in the joy. There were costume parades and pumpkin contests, harvest lunches and quiet moments of reflection. Even those who claimed not to celebrate couldn't help but smile at the sight of children's excitement, or the way the world glowed a little brighter under the watch of jack-o'-lanterns. The season had become a language everyone understood, the language of belonging. What was once about survival through the dark months had become about celebration. But the purpose was the same: to hold light together. The fires that once burned on Celtic hillsides now flickered in city streets and suburban yards, each one carrying the same silent message. We are here, we are connected, we are not alone. For many, October became a time to slow down and notice, to sit on porches and watch the world grow golden, to wrap scarves a little tighter and sip warm drinks by the fire, to tell stories that remind us of where we come from, and to share laughter that reminds us of where we are. The heart of Halloween, and of all autumn, was never about fright. It was about presence, about remembering that even as the days grow short, there is beauty in every ending and warmth in every gathering. So when night fell and the lanterns flickered, when the stars peeked out between drifting clouds and the sound of distant laughter filled the air, there was a sense of peace. The spirit of togetherness, that old, unbroken thread, shimmered quietly through it all. From hilltop fires to city porches, from whispered prayers to joyful songs, it was always the same story. People finding their way home to one another, guided by the gentle light they carried inside. Chapter 10. The Heart of the Season. Now the leaves are fallen. The fields, once golden, are bare again, and the wind moves quietly through them, carrying the scent of distant wood smoke. The harvest is long since gathered. The lanterns have burned low, and October itself feels like a deep, contented sigh. The people of old would have called this the threshold, the place between what has been and what is to come. It is a pause, a rest, a moment to stand still and listen to the quiet wisdom of the world. All through history, this time of year has asked the same gentle question: can you let go? Can you release what's finished? The work, the worry, the weight, and trust in the turning of things. For those who once stood in the fields after harvest, letting go was as natural as breathing. The earth showed them how. Trees released their leaves without sorrow, rivers slowed their song, and the sky itself seemed to lean inward, asking everyone to rest. That lesson still lingers in us, even now. When the air turns cool and the light softens, something in our hearts knows to slow down. We bake, we light candles, we gather blankets, not only to stay warm, but to remind ourselves that peace can be made. That safety is not the absence of change, but the acceptance of it. The world will turn, winter will come, and life, in its infinite wisdom, will bloom again when it's ready. The heart of the season is not in pumpkins or costumes or even candles, though those are beautiful reflections of it. The heart of the season lives in gratitude, in every thank you whispered into the quiet, in every loaf shared, every lantern lit, every story told by firelight. It lives in the laughter of children and the silence of stars, in the knowing that no matter how many centuries pass, the simple desire to love and be loved, to bring light to the dark, will always remain. If you close your eyes now, you can almost feel the pulse of that ancient rhythm beneath everything, the hum of life, resting, preparing, trusting. The same hum that guided the first harvesters, the first families who lit candles in their windows, the first children who carried lanterns through the dark. That hum still carries you, even here, even now. You are part of it, one bright thread in the endless tapestry of seasons turning. And so, when the October night grows still and the last candle flickers low, there is nothing to fear in the dark. It is only the earth dreaming, preparing to be born anew. In that knowing, you can rest. Our final chapter, the quiet light. Now, dear one, let it all settle. You've walked through time tonight, through fields and fires, lanterns and laughter, harvests and hearts. You've seen how the story of Halloween began, not in fear, but in gratitude and gentleness. You've felt how every flame, from the first bonfire to the smallest candle, was lit for the same reason, to remember that light lives within us. Take a deep, slow breath in and exhale softly. Let the sound of your breath be like wind moving through tall grass. Feel your body grow heavier, your thoughts quieter, your spirit lighter. You have arrived at your own peaceful harvest, a moment where you can set down everything you've carried and simply be. Imagine a small candle glowing inside your chest, warm and steady. With each breath, its light grows softer but stronger until it fills every corner of you. It is not the light of effort, it's the light of being. It asks nothing, it simply shines. Around you, the world is quiet. Outside, the night is cool and kind. The stars watch over you, the same way they've watched over every soul who has ever rested at this turning of the year. In this calm, you are connected to every fire ever lit, every harvest ever gathered, every heart that has ever hoped for peace. The story of Halloween is your story too. The story of change, of gratitude, of finding light in darkness. You are part of that long, beautiful lineage of souls who remember what it means to slow down, to give thanks, and to trust. And now, there's nothing more to do. Let your breathing slow. Let your body melt deeper into the surface beneath you. The candlelight of the mind grows dim, the world grows soft and golden, and the quiet takes your hand. You are safe. You are home. The season has turned, and you too can rest. Sleep well, dear one. May your dreams be gentle, your heart be light, and your spirit forever warmed by the soft glow of the sleepy history of Halloween.